Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, coming to you 6 days a week as we interview whitetail experts and hear their traditions and personal stories of the hunt. Learn more about the latest gear, discover proven tips, and the latest strategies so you can make your next hunt a success. Now, here's your host, Bruce Hutchin.
This is Whitetail Rendezvous Podcast, episode number 238.
On today's show, we're going to have Mr. Kip Adams. Kip is a certified wildlife biologist and the director of education and outreach for QDMA. Kip's going to talk about three things: current harvest structure of bucks across their range, the current deer knowledge level of hunters, and the declining fawn recruitment rates across the U.S. Listen in, folks. You're going to learn a lot. I always do when Kip's on the show. Hey, listeners, don't forget to text 33444 Food Plot for your free Food Plot ebook. Welcome to another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. This is your host, Bruce Hutchin, and we're going to connect with Kip Adams. Now, Kip is a certified wildlife biologist and QDMA's Director of Education and Outreach. Kip, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Bruce. I appreciate being here.
Well, since we last talked, I'm going to call it a year or so, what's happening over at QDMA these days?
Well, we're having a good year. Our membership continues to grow, which is a great sign. That means that the hunters want to continue to learn more about deer and enhancing habitat and how to be a better hunter. So we've got some new educational programs, lots of things for youth hunters, and overall life is good.
Well, that's great. And what things are you focused on personally yourself in the education? Because people email me all the time or text me and say, Bruce, can I find out about this? Can I find out about that? And I use you guys as a resource because I think, bar none, you probably have the best data, best information in the whitetail world. So just share with me what's going on in education and what type of questions are people asking.
Well, I certainly appreciate that compliment regarding our educational materials. And the newest things that we have, we always put out our annual whitetail report, which provides information for hunters, and that's a hunter favorite. But the newest thing, and I'm really excited about this, is a hunter book. You can buy a book to really help you do just about anything in the world. Build computers, I think brain surgery, anything else, but there's not a really good book that really explains hunting and how to get involved, what to do, how to scout, and all that. So we partner with QDMA, who's the largest provider of online hunter education classes in the U.S. It's like 300,000 people that sign up for that every year, but about 100,000 of them drop out. So QDMA said, hey, the biggest thing that the hunters want is a true book on how to do this. And there's not a good one available. So we wrote this book for them. It's actually an ebook. And what they're going to use it for is an incentive for people to stay in that class. And if you graduate from their online hunter class, you get that for free. In addition to that, we'll sell the book, but Primos worked with us to provide all the video components to it. But the topics cover everything that a hunter needs to know, from how to find where to hunt, public land, private land, how to ask permission, gearing up what you need, how to prepare yourself, how to prepare your bow or firearm, scouting, how to know where to be, tree stands, preparing for the shot, after the shot, processing, mentoring somebody else, the whole gamut. So that's going to come out a little bit later this year, and I am super excited for it. I got to write a few of the chapters, and I got to review all of the books, so it is going to be a tremendous resource for hunters, whether you're just starting or you've been hunting for decades. So I'm looking forward to that getting out and being able to share some more information with folks who seek that kind of stuff.
Now, where's that going to be posted for sale? Right on QDMA's website? We
will, yes, sir. We'll have it on our website. I'm not sure exactly where else it'll be sold, but the cool thing about it being an ebook is that it'll certainly be a very nominal price. It'll be something that we can continually update. Which is something obviously you can't do when a book is in print. So it'll allow us to continually provide either new video components and or updated material, updated research, that kind of thing. So QDMA.com will be the best place to get it, but I'm not sure where else it'll be available too. But we'll do everything we can to make it as easy as possible for people to find.
Well, keep us in mind over here at Whitetail Rendezvous, because I'd love to help promote that, because like I said, people do ask questions. They're thirsty for knowledge, and some of our old traditions work well. I've been hunting whitetails for 50 years, but there's so many changes, and if you don't change up your game, you're missing out on some of the wonderful aspects of hunting that are available to us today.
I agree, and we'll certainly keep you posted.
Thank you so much for that. Let's get into the current harvest structure of bucks across their range. And how many states now have whitetails in them?
There's just about every state in the U.S. does. Certainly everybody east of the Rocky Mountains does. Once you get west of the Rocky Mountains, mule deer and elk are more prized, I guess, than whitetails. But just about every state does. Obviously, you get into the real desert country, and there's places where you don't have them. But almost everybody does. I guess from a hunter end, if from the Rocky Mountains east, there's 37 states that encompass the most of the deer's range, and actually about 97% of the whitetails live east of the Rocky Mountains, and that matches pretty closely with hunters, because about 97% of the hunters in the U.S. also live east of the Rocky Mountains. So deer and hunters overlap pretty well.
Well, that's good. And let's talk about the age structure of the bucks that are being harvested today.
This is one of the neatest trends that's going on right now across the whitetails range, and it's something that hunters should be super proud of. The data that we presented this year in our 2016 whitetail report, we always look at state by state harvest with regard to numbers of bucks and does, age structure, that, and that harvest actually was from the 2014 season. And the reason for that, Bruce, is unfortunately there's a few states right now that don't have all of their data analyzed from this past deer season. So the most recent season, where everything is complete, analyzed, and able to look at, showed that in that year, for the first time in the history of deer management in the U.S., hunters killed more bucks that were at least 3.5 years old than that were just 1.5. So, which is absolutely amazing. So, literally 33% of all the bucks we killed, all the antler bucks, so those that are 1 or older, only 33% of them were just 1.5 years old. 34% were 3 or older, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 years old. That had never happened before. We've always killed more yearling bucks than anything else. So that number has been trending downward for the last couple of decades. And in 2014/15 hunting season, it actually crossed, and that's absolutely amazing. So great opportunities for hunters, and kudos for hunters. They're the ones that really drove that and made that happen. So, and now they're getting to reap the benefits of it.
Well said, Kip. And one thing I think about 2 years ago, it was just some miserable weather, and I was able to hunt a number of states, and everybody was crying in their beer, if you will, because they just weren't seeing the bucks. But then the next year, on our farm, where I hunt in Wisconsin, we killed a 160 and a 135 and a 140-ish mature deer. And today I'm shifting from Boone and Crockett or Pope and Young scores to mature deer. And in my mind, a mature deer is 4.5 years old. Is that a fair point to say a mature deer, or would you say 3.5?
Well, 3.5. They still have growing to do after that. They've achieved almost maximum body size. At 3.5, their antlers are somewhere between 50 and 75% full grown. But the many hunters in the United States today are targeting that 3.5-year-old buck. Some wait, they would like to see and get one more year at 4.5. So a 4.5-year-old can be certainly structurally mature, little bit of growing and more of their antlers, but by 4.5, their antlers are almost going to be as big as they are later. So yeah, but I really applaud you, though, for hunting it from a maturity level rather than just an antler level. And you're seeing an increased number of hunters do that. It's one of the ways we can get ourselves in trouble is by focusing too much attention just on the antlers, and either measuring a hunt success by how big the antlers were. It's way better better to gauge that based on the age of that animal. Because if you shoot a buck that is 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever, it doesn't really matter what the antlers are. And sure, we like big antlers, but if you're harvesting that deer by age and you're harvesting an older animal like that, man, you should be super proud of yourself, regardless of how big or small its antlers are. So I'm glad to hear you say that. That's very good.
Well, thank you for that. And why do you think this trend has crossed the line from shooting, if brown and down, if it's got horns, it's legal, I'm going to shoot it, to, hey, let's see what we got on our land, and then let's see if we can hunt Mr. Wonderful?
I think part of it is lots of states, and actually there's 23 different states in the U.S. that have antler restrictions for some part of the state, designed to protect those 1.5-year-old bucks. So certainly in those states, there's a lot of yearling bucks that make it to their second birthday, and then they obviously become harder to shoot then. But I think an even bigger reason is that you just have this trend of today's hunter being so much more knowledgeable on the benefits of protecting yearling bucks and appreciative of the opportunity to hunt bucks that are 2 years old or 3 years old or 4 or older, that there's just a lot of voluntary passing of those younger deer. Even in the states that have antler restrictions that protect yearlings, a lot of those hunters don't even shoot 2-year-old bucks. Even though they're legal, they're letting them get a little older. So the biggest reason for that shift is just a cultural shift in hunters wanting the opportunity to hunt older deer and understanding the benefits if they don't shoot all of those 1.5-year-old bucks. So, benefits to the deer herd and certainly benefits to the hunters. And so that's where, the real improvement has been made. Agencies doing a better job encouraging hunters to do that, showing them the benefits. Places like QDMA and other organizations, yourself, lots of educators out there providing information to show hunters the benefits of protecting yearling bucks. And so today's hunter is just far more knowledgeable on that. So you see that age structure of bucks increasing, and then we get to hunt a deer that's a little bit older. We get to photograph bucks that are older, which obviously, as you're well aware, provides more vocalization during the hunting season. We see more rut activity, more rubs, more scrapes, all that fun stuff that as hunters we love to see. So it's a really good time to be hunting whitetails.
And a guy shared with me the other day. He said, Bruce, it's all about recruitment of age class, and I knew what he was talking about because we talked about that in the Rocky Mountains with our elk and our deer and all our species out here. And but listeners, you're recruiting from one age class, 1.5, then he's 2.5, and the odds of him living get better and better the older they get. Kip, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they certainly do, and there's lots of research that shows that basically if we don't kill them during the deer season or hit them with our trucks, they're going to be alive the next year. And obviously we lose some of those to disease and natural causes, but for the most part they have pretty high survival rates. So outside of the hunting season, so a 2-year-old buck is a lot harder to shoot than a yearling. In many cases, a buck that's lived to 3 years old is even more difficult than a 2-year-old. And I think part of it is it's not necessarily that they get a lot smarter as they get older, but I think the ones that get older got older because of their movement patterns, and they probably were a little more wary anyway as younger deer. So it's not that as a deer goes from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 that their behavior changes or their movement pattern differs a lot, but it tends to be, and we know this because there's so many GPS radio collar studies that have gone on over the past 5 or 6 years. But what you see is those deer that tend to be a little more secretive or don't travel quite as far as those younger animals end up living to be a little older, and then obviously they're just way harder to kill once we start putting pressure on them. But it's pretty interesting, some of the studies that we see now with GPS collars allow us to see. But no question, older bucks are much more difficult than those yearling deer to kill.
Now, we're getting older bucks. I'm just going to stay with the farm that I've been so graciously been able to hunt for so many years. And we're noticing that the bigger deer, the behaviors, the travel patterns change, the range actually gets smaller. And how do we maintain a balanced herd? Because if we're recruiting age classes into the 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, all of a sudden, the only deer some, like the nieces and nephews, are seeing are younger deer because they just don't put in the time and they're hunting in Wisconsin in the 9-day gun season. So how do we balance the herd now if we're reaching a good upper age class, but the younger age class are the only ones we're seeing?
Yeah, fortunately there is enough mortality of those bucks, to keep it pretty balanced. It's usually not a problem to keep a balanced age structure like that. Obviously, they're a lot harder to kill when they're older, but there's enough other things that will take their toll, whether it be the rut and people just tend to see them more, or cars, disease, etc. It's good to have those deer moving into older age classes, and for the most part, you don't have to worry about ending up with too many of them in those older age classes. So that's a problem a lot of people would like to have, but in reality, that definitely or generally not a problem. The problem comes in if you shoot too many of the younger ones, then you don't end up with any of the older ones left. So I would continue trying to protect the majority of those younger ones where you are. I'd certainly let the youth hunters there and the new guys and gals take whatever they wanted, whether that was a 1-year-old or anything else. But as long as you protect the majority of those young ones, in most cases you end up with a pretty well-managed buck population.
What about the food plots and feeding? Is there something that an older buck, 4.5 years or older, likes better than the younger deer, or is it just they're more secretive how they feed?
A lot of times, though, those deer, we can watch them during the summer, and you think, man, they're out in the fields and they're so visible. But then they say, we say, well, they know the deer season's here because they disappeared. Well, it's not so much that they know that it's deer season, but they are reacting to human pressure. We're not bothering them for most of the summer, but what happens as soon as hunting season starts, or just before it, when we're in the woods, we're hanging in the stands, we're scouting, we're checking, we're moving cameras, all of a sudden, those bucks realize, hey, there's a lot more human activity here than there was last month or the last couple months, and that's what they're reacting to. They're avoiding all of that additional presence in the woods or in and around those fields where they were feeding. So in most cases, it's not necessarily that they're more secretive by nature. They just react much more quickly to the pressure that hunters apply than those younger deer do.
That's interesting, and I'm just trying to think of some of the stands we have. But I'm thinking some of the stands we have, and some are better during specific months during the season, like an early season stand. We're seeing a lot of does, and every once in a while we'll see a mature buck. And then other stands, we see more mature bucks than does or yearling bucks. Why is that?
It probably has something to do with how those stands or the area that they're in. Maybe it's a really good movement pattern, or a funnel or something. Maybe food source related. If you're seeing older deer there, it's probably either a function of it's a good place as they're traveling to get either from bedding to food or searching for does. But I bet you there's at least some component of the stands you have there that it's easier for you to enter and exit those stands without those deer knowing it. Because most people, once they're in a stand, can sit still enough to not be spooking deer. Most hunting stands get ruined when people are entering them and they're spooking deer while they're going there, or, and my personal opinion is more importantly, when they get out of the stand and leave and either spook deer while they're getting down or as they're leaving. So there's nothing that will ruin a stand more than deer, you spooking deer from it. So it may be that the stands that you tend to see more older bucks out of, they're either the way you have them positioned or something with the wind patterns or terrain or just how you're able to access and leave them, that you just scare deer or allow deer to know that you were there way less at those, which then they tend to be a little better for seeing those older deer.
Listeners, I heard what Kip just said, because we all have favorite stands. We all have productive stands. And he just brought up a key point and lessons learned to everybody. The easier you can get into and out of your stand with the least scent, noise, whatever, the more successful that stand's going to be. And I find that so truthful. I was hunting Buffalo County in a river stand and river bottom stand, and wonderful stand, but I could hunt it 1 or maybe 2 days. and I'd have to be so careful walking out at night because I would bump deer and I'd hear them snort. And I go, oh, man, I can't come back here tomorrow. And I'd have to rest that stand. And it was a great stand. And if you could slip in and slip out, and I've thought about taking canoe and come in from a completely different area, and I could take the canoe probably 10 yards from my stand. And next time I hunt the stand, I think I'm going to do that because that's the only way I could get in and get out without messing up the whole, 40-acre river bottom where my stand was.
So, and that's really where a lot of the hunting knowledge today is being directed, not so much at, safety of hanging a stand or kind of where deer move, but it's really gone to another level now and putting a stand up such that you can get there and get out without alerting deer. And I will absolutely hang a stand in an area that I think is not quite as good as another area, but that in my mind I know I can get in and out safely without spooking deer. And you can talk to some of the better deer hunters in the United States, the Bill Winkies, the Dan Perez's, Whitetail Properties, those guys, and that's the mindset that they have. We had a Deer Steward class that we taught last month, and Bill Winky took all of our students to a field trip on his place and spent a half a day with him talking about his stand setups and his thought process. And Bill Winky is obviously an extremely successful hunter. Anybody who watches his Midwest Whitetail show knows that. And he really, really impressed upon our students. His thought process is all about getting in and getting out without being detected. And it's pretty cool to see, some of the more successful hunters. That's the mindset they have. So I think it's great then that we take that, share it with all the hunters, and help them. So, 5 or 10 years ago, you plant a food plot and you hang a stand on the edge of it because, deer were coming, and you realize, man, the first time I hunted it, I saw a bunch. Second time, I saw a few, and by the third time, I didn't see any. And now that same hunter is hunting, 100 yards off that food plot, catching those deer, going to it, and leaving it in such a manner that he spooks very few. So he may not see all of the deer that are in the plot, but he or she are seeing deer, on every sit or almost every sit, which then allows that stand to just be way more productive throughout the course of the season, not just once or twice.
Yeah, and 100 yards off a food plot, I call it the staging area, and that connects to a transition zone, which connects back to their bedding area or their security cover. And when I think about that, how many times we have our favorite stand, it's been sitting in that same corner because every year, without fail, sooner or later, you're going to see a mature buck come through there, and it's just a matter of being in there. But what I found out with that thought process, Kip, is that the days I was hunting were the right days to see the deer. That's what it meant to me. The moon phase, the wind, everything, how quiet it was to get in and out. And then all of a sudden he'd show up, or I'd see him, at a distance, but he was coming through. Your thoughts on that?
I think there's absolutely the need to pay attention to those other factors, especially the wind. In my mind, there is nothing that's impacting their movement more than that, and there's a fair amount of research to support that, and certainly lifetimes of hunting experience that will support, the importance of the wind with where deer are moving, when, etc. So I think firstly you have to have a place that deer knows, or at least thinks that it's safe to travel through. Hasn't been spooked from a certain stand, which gives you an opportunity for him to be in the area. Next, the wind has to be in such a way that, if you are in that stand and he's coming by, that you're not spooking him before he gets there. So, which is very important. And then just knowing all the other environmental variables that are playing into that. Is it on a feeding route? Is he headed to a bedding area? Is he headed to an area to chase does? I think the more that we can understand about why deer want to move, when, and then for what reason, it just allows us to put ourselves in better situations to cross paths with them and to be within either rifle or bow range.
We've been spending the last 15 minutes about the current deer knowledge level of hunters, and both Kip and I would agree that it's increasing exponentially because of the social media platforms, because of YouTube, because of programs such as QDMA. And Kip, just give a shout out to the listeners how they can get in touch with QDMA, how they can find out about the courses that Bill Winke was part of. Share some of that information with us.
Sure. We're a national nonprofit organization that specializes in education and outreach to hunters and landowners and natural resource professionals. So they can reach us at QDMA.com is the easiest way. Our website's full of educational materials and other opportunities like the Deer Steward class we just talked about, et cetera. But QDMA.com is nice and easy one to remember, easy way to get a hold of us. And we work with hunters across the country every day, and so glad to work with more.
Let's talk. Just give a promo for your Deer Steward program. Why people take it, what they're going to learn, and anything else you'd like to add.
Okay. The Deer Steward program has surpassed our wildest dreams with regard to how much people would enjoy it and the number of people that want to come to it. There's two levels of it. The first level is it's a class. It's a weekend class that people can come to learn about the four cornerstones of QDM. So we cover the herd management end, how to improve habitat, hunter management, herd monitoring, all the latest research on deer. So it's designed to teach you more about the animal, how to be a better hunter, and how to improve habitat for them. So we have hunters, landowners, state and federal wildlife agencies send folks. It is an intense deer class over the course of a weekend that we teach a few times each year in different regions throughout the United States. We've been doing it for 10 years now, and there's well over 1,500 people that have come to these classes, which is pretty neat. The fun thing from the students' end is we limit each class to 30 to 40 people so that there's a lot of interaction time for them between the other students and the instructors. So there's typically 3 to 5 QDMA biologists, as well as a couple college professors, the likes of Dr. Carl Miller, one of the most famous deer researchers in the country, Dr. Craig Harper from the University of Tennessee, the top habitat person in the country. So it's some QDMA staff, other experts that do the teaching, and the cool thing is we're all hunters as well, so we look at this and teach it from a hunting end, not just from a book end. So people come, sit, they get to learn from these folks, and then if they decide, I want to take level 2 is even more fun because it's the application of what you learned in level 1. So level 1 is all indoors. Level 2 is mostly outside in the field, hands in the dirt. We're looking at no-till drills. We're calibrating seeders. We're talking about how to plant. We're analyzing camera data. They're measuring fetuses to determine when that doe was conceived, aging jawbones, making deer harvest recommendations, all the fun stuff, that we do with this. So looking at maps, selecting stand sites, that kind of thing. So, it's the most intensive deer course that we can take. There's not even a college course that is that specific on deer taught anywhere in the country. So that's why I think it's been so popular and why people continue to come to it. And we also have an online version of it. Folks can't make it in person, which has also been extremely popular. So we actually filmed one of the in-person classes, so they can watch that. But it's a neat testament to see how much hunger there is by hunters for that kind of knowledge to make themselves more knowledgeable and better wildlife stewards. So that's a pretty good sign for the future of deer hunting.
Thank you for that. And we got about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes left. Let's talk about the declining fawn recruitment rates across the United States, how it's measured, why you think it's happening, and how can we reverse it?
This is a really big issue today, and it really has been over the past decade. And actually what it is, most states will measure the fawn recruitment rate. And what that means is it's the number of fawns that are alive at the beginning of hunting season. And we talk about that as fawns per doe. So we know that many does will have twins in the spring, but it doesn't mean that both of those fawns will be alive in the fall. So it's the number of fawns per doe in the fall, opening day of deer season, and it's a really good measure of how productive that deer herd is. But what it directly relates to for hunters is how many deer can we shoot this fall? Because in really productive deer herds, that means there will be more bucks available for harvest, more deer available to see, more does available for harvest. When you have less productive deer herds, that just means that as hunters, we can't shoot as many without driving deer herds down. So what we do at QDMA is we monitor this on a state-by-state basis across the U.S., and we've been doing this for about 15 years now. And what we found was back in 2000, so 16 years ago, the average adult doe recruited almost one fawn. It was just below one, which is a very high recruitment rate. So we're pumping lots of fawns into the system. If you fast forward to today, that has dropped all the way down to just over half a fawn per doe. So it's actually 0.58 fawns per doe in 2015. So what that means is it takes a lot more does to recruit that number of fawns today than did in the past. And the things that impact that are there's more predators today than ever before, bears and bobcats and coyotes and wolves in some places and mountain lions, obviously. But bears and coyotes are the biggest. There's more of them. We have lower density deer herds in a lot of places by design. Deer herds that were too abundant, agencies have reduced them. So you have fewer does and fewer fawns are surviving. So what that means is the average deer herd today is just not nearly as productive as it was in the past. So if you end up with things like a bad drought, bad disease year, or something like that, those deer herds don't rebound nearly as quickly. And as hunters, we can't shoot nearly as many deer in the fall without reducing deer herds below what the acceptable levels are. So if you're in an area where there's too many deer and you can't slow them down, or having fewer fawns is a really, really good thing, I guess. But for the average hunter, we don't want our deer herds to be less healthy or less productive. We want to make sure they're very productive, very healthy. So the recruitment rate is a very important thing to monitor, because then the number of deer that we harvest in the fall gets adjusted because of it. So, and that essentially has been falling off the table for the last 15 years. Big, steep declines in almost every state. So it's clearly one of the biggest issues that the deer managers are watching today, and something that QDMA monitors very, very closely across the whitetails range.
Now, you mentioned bears and coyotes. I've got a friend in upper Wisconsin that's got a wolf carrying a fawn right through his food plot, and of course we got a picture of it. And I think of that, and there's always been predation, but with the increasing bears and coyotes, how big an impact do you think predation is having on the recruitment rate?
In some areas, I think minimal impact. In other areas, tremendous impacts, particularly in the southeastern U.S., where coyotes are a pretty new phenomenon. There's lots of research out of there that shows fawn recruitment rates, in the 0.2 range, so 5 does to recruit 1 fawn, that's just incredible. And in the north and in much of the Midwest, we've had coyotes for a long, long time. Our deer herds seem to be just dealing with them a little better. So in most of the areas that have had coyotes and bears for a long time, they're holding their own with regard to predation. So is predation a concern? Absolutely. It's certainly something that's taken fawns, but I don't think it's nearly as big of an issue as it is in most of the southeastern U.S., where coyotes are just absolutely hammering a lot of those fawns and making it very difficult for those managers to balance deer numbers.
Thanks for that. And Kip, we're at the time of the show. The show goes so fast when I have guests like you on, so thank you for that. But share a couple of shout-outs to whomever, and then we'll wrap the show.
All right. I'd certainly like to thank all the deer hunters out there, first of all, for being hunters and for being good ambassadors for this thing that we love, and obviously for managing our deer and other wildlife populations. They're the ones that drive those systems. They're the ones that pay for all that for conservation, and everybody in the United States that appreciates any type of wildlife or wild places ought to thank a hunter, because we're the ones that pay for it.
And one more time, how do people get a hold of QDMA?
Folks can get us, website's easiest. That's QDMA.com. If they don't want to do that and they want to call, we have an easy number. It's 800-209-DEER. So pretty easy to remember if you're a deer hunter.
Kip Adams, thank you so much for sharing some of your time today and helping educate the listeners of Whitetail Rendezvous.
Thank you, Bruce. It was great talking to you. You have a great day, and good luck everywhere you hunt this fall.
Make sure you tune in to the next episode of Whitetail Rendezvous. We're going to head down to Texas, and we're going to meet up with Matt Moore. Matt is the founder, owner, and producer of Closing the Distance TV. Matt's going to talk about Moment of Truth segment of his show, deer management, and ethical shot placement. Matt's got some really good insights, so you don't want to miss this one.
Hey, a special friend, Paige Darden of My Topo says, before you head into the woods, visit mytopo.com to design a waterproof map centered on the area you plan to hunt. Overlay public boundaries such as wildlife management areas and private land owner parcel data and owners' names. My Topo prints and ships within 24 hours for quick delivery to your mailbox. Find out who owns all the land around your favorite hunting spots. It's a great service I use often, and I highly recommend it to you.
Thanks for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Whitetail Rendezvous, where you can listen and learn from the experts so you can be more successful on your next hunt. Until next time, listen, learn, and succeed.